Hello, everybody, and welcome to our show. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with my good friend Clay Moore from Leighton O'Brien. Clay, could you tell everyone, please, a little bit about your roles and responsibilities?
Hey Tim, it's great to meet with you. I'm the senior director of product here at Leighton O'Brien. I work with a team where we've been centralizing data from all assets, from tank testing, inventory forecasting, alarms, into one centralized location known as iHub or Intelligence Hub, where we're basically providing more insights with the data that you currently have on hand to really understand your industry.
Clay, the C-store industry is in a very difficult environment today. We're still recovering from a pandemic, all kinds of inflation, financial issues, and the like. Can you talk a little bit about how ATGs might be used to improve a C-store's cash flow and perhaps even their P&L?
Right. Absolutely. One of the easiest and probably the first things that you really want to understand is how much fuel you actually need on hand, and are you keeping too much inventory on in stock? Often I see lots of secondary products like premium or kerosene with large 5,000, 6,000 gallons worth of volume that's being maintained for, you know, that has never been used. So you'll see like 7 or even 20 or even a month's worth of volume just sitting there under the ground, not being used because everybody's using the unleaded stock. So understanding what your days on hand requirements are and being able to reduce that, take some of that capital that you've invested in the fuel out of the ground and being used better for cash flow.
Clay, this seems like a really interesting proposition that for a lot of operators who may have some excess inventory in the ground, a very easy way to get and improve their cash flow is to kind of liquidate some of those assets. Can you provide some principles, though, for how to do this intelligently? I mean, you want to be very careful about running out of your fuel and not being able to serve your customers, do you not?
Oh, yeah, great question, Tim. The first thing, I mean, the first rule of thumb is to make sure you have enough days of supply of fuel on hand so that you have enough time to get resupply before you run out. Now, most people have 3 days supply for the secondary products, but you can actually go down a lot further. Um, the first step is really understanding if the ATG volume amount that's being reported is correct. So making sure your ATG tank chart is programmed properly so that the volume levels are correct is kind of step one. Step two is understanding how much supply is being used daily. This is that forecasting where you're looking at 6 weeks of data, for example, to really forecast to make sure the same day usage for the same period. This gets into the forecasting models where you can make sure that if it's Tuesday and it's going to take me a day to get supply, how much do I forecast to make sure I have enough fuel? So the first rule of thumb is making sure you get an ATG alarm or alert before you get so low that you won't be able to supply in time. So you definitely want to avoid the runouts.
That's interesting. The idea that your ATGs could be miscalibrated. So you may think you have 5,000 gallons of extra fuel and it may only be 2 or 3,000 and you definitely need to know that. So getting that calibrated firsthand seems to be of critical importance. When you think about the pattern of usage, how much data do you need? How many days do you need in order to understand the fuel demands?
Well, I mean, the more data, the better. I come from a long line of data analytics myself, and I like to really make sure that we understand the current trend, which is really basically 6 weeks. You want to look at the past month, maybe a little more, to really understand what your current usage is, what your buying cycles are now. But if you have a year's worth of data, this is where you can look at seasonality from last year, looking at how the holidays impacted. So being able to do surge forecasting based on, say, inclement weather, being able to factor in all these things that are going to cause a sway in demand, and being able to have real-time visibility to that inventory will allow you to be able to make quicker decisions. If your fuel supply is now increased based on your forecast, maybe you need to get a supply, replenishment sooner than later. And the reverse of that is also true. If your supply if your sales are down and you now have more stock on hand than what you'd anticipated, this could also impact your usage as well as far as having a retain or something of that nature.
Oh, this is very helpful, Clay. So you have excess, in many cases, you may have excess inventory that could be liquidated to kind of improve your cash flow. You need to understand, first calibrate and make sure that the instruments you're relying on, your ATGs, are properly calibrated so that you actually have a real, a true understanding how much fuel you have. And then you've also introduced this idea of getting real-time understanding so that you can respond to fluctuations and the like. Any other advice or any other things to think about?
Well, well, from the ATG standpoint, how you can maximize it is really being able to program it where you have it working for you. Being able to get a delivery needed warning at the right time to let you know that you don't need to order fuel until this flag goes off. This allows you to be able to respond, get your orders in promptly so that you have plenty of time without just, ordering fuel, keeping things overstocked. But you also want to program the gauge to a low product alarm or a shutoff so that you never hit that threshold that could impact your maintenance as far as your lines or your customer experience. So having it to shut off before it hits the sludge at the bottom of the tank. Programming these two levels is so critical for a smooth operation because it prevents due costly maintenance expense, as well as being able to make sure that you have enough time to get fuel resupplied before there is an outage. So those two levels are kind of the two things that I've often seen are never programmed in the ATG.
Oh, that's very helpful, Clay. Certainly, you don't want to have excess inventory, but at the same point, you don't want to drain out your inventory so low that you start to create other problems for yourself. Clay, thank you very much for joining us. Everyone, I've been speaking with Clay Moore of Leighton O'Brien, and he's been helping us understand how tank gauges, the ATG data, can be used to improve a C-store operator's cash flow and P&L.